Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio .world. It's me, Tony B. This is part of our special impact of the coronavirus pandemic on South Seattle and surrounding communities. We're going to be talking to leadership from Spokane, Washington, to talk about some of the issues that are impacting that community over there. As we know now, you know what? We've been talking about this since we started broadcasting, that communities of color, black communities, Asian communities, were going to bear the brunt of this. Low-income communities were going to bear the brunt of this, even though the coronavirus does not recognize race. The systemic things that have happened and taken place in this country continue to take place. Those things, they don't just go away. And so what you're seeing now, in particular with the health impact of this, is the disproportionate impact of number of deaths on black folks. The disproportionate number of deaths on black folks in communities who are getting the COVID-19 coronavirus. And remember, when this started out, black folks were saying, we can't get this. And when there had been no confirmed cases in Africa, it was reinforcing some things that happened that probably resulted in the community not responding as quickly as it should have because of the messaging that was going out. Well, we've been talking about it here in Western Washington, in particular South Seattle. We've talked early on with folks from our community, Ty Dow and Josephine Howe, who were COVID-19 positive, who elected to come on the radio show and say, hey, wait a minute, I have this. If you're not hearing about it in our community, that doesn't mean it's not out there. And both of them were courageous enough to come on with us early in this process and say, look, I have this. I want people to know, just in case you saw me, you were with me, you talked to me, and I don't know you. I'm positive. And we have to get the word out into our community. And that's what we've been doing. Now, the other thing about this is we've been talking to some of the other communities not as large as Seattle. Again, Edmonds and Lacey and Tacoma. We just talked to Mayor Woodards yesterday. And right now we're reaching out to Spokane, and I want to make sure I have a couple of people on the line with me. And is it Carmen? Is the name Pacheco Jones? Carmen, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
And did I say it correctly? Is it Pacheco?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
All right, and I'll get back to you in a second. And Sandy Williams. Sandy, are you on the line?
I'm here.
All right, and let me see. Pastor Mitchell, are you on the line?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
All right. Welcome to each of you. And I guess we'll get started in the same way. This time is going to go by really quickly. So let's start out by just quickly saying who you are and a little bit about the organization or entity you're with, and then we'll get into some questions. If we can do that in about a minute, that would be great. And Carmen, we'll start with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tony. My name is Carmen Pacheco Jones, and I am the African American Health Initiative Specialist. And in today's capacity, I'm here as a member of the Racial Equity Committee of Spokane Regional Law and Justice.
And Pastor Lonnie Mitchell.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for having us. Appreciate all that you're doing and getting the word out about this across the state. I'm Lonnie Mitchell, pastor of Bethel African Methodist Church here in Spokane, Washington, and also just a part of the community of color, just trying to keep us all informed. So thank you once again for having us.
And then also Sandy Williams. Sandy, welcome.
Tony, so I'm Sandy Williams. I'm the publisher and editor of the Black Lens newspaper, which is a community independent African-American focused newspaper that I've been publishing for the past 5 years. Also the executive director of the Carl Maxey Center, which is a new African-American cultural center in Spokane, Washington, that hopefully is going to address some of the racial disparities that we are seeing in the Spokane community.
Okay, well, this first question, it's the same question I ask everybody when they come on the show. In this particular instance, I'd also, if you would like to specifically address the impact on the Black community in Spokane, which is one of the things that we've done, and you can talk about overall as well. But in having these conversations with folks in Bremerton and surrounding areas, whose communities may be smaller or may be more rural, it was very enlightening to find out what was happening in those communities and to be able to share what was taking place in other communities. And so, and again, the other part about this is you got to remember, as communal folks who gather in places, Black folks aren't able to go to church. They aren't able to meet at the social club. They aren't able to, again, do some of the things where information would be exchanged and check on each other and find out how things are going. And so when I ask you this question, as I said before, sometimes people may agree, sometimes people may not agree. There may be different circumstances that are taking place within the same community. So this is my initial question. And I'm going to go back to see if you answer the question. You can certainly talk about whatever you want to. We've got time. But the question is, what is the impact of the coronavirus on the community of Spokane, the Black community, and then how has Black leadership responded during this time? And I'm going to go in the same order that I started with. And I'll start with you, Carmen. How has the coronavirus pandemic impacted Spokane? How has it impacted specifically the Black community in Spokane? And what has Black leadership done at this time?
Thank you, Tony. I will just say that, the resilience of the Black community, especially, in a predominantly white, city, has just kind of just really, shown during this time. Early on, we saw, faith leaders, other leaders in the community really stepping up and trying to figure out, like, how do we best serve our community? One of the impacts I would like to talk about today, and where I am, currently working at, is looking at disparities that already exist within our justice system that disproportionately impact Black individuals, and seeing that as the city quickly moved to release individuals from our local jail to reduce the impact of COVID-19 internally, the individuals that were left behind were Black and Brown individuals. And so working with the justice system on addressing that,
So I'm sorry, Carmen. Let me make sure I heard you correctly, because correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that folks who were let out of jail were not Black and Brown people. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, that is exactly what I said. What had happened is, as with all these assessment tools that are just embedded with bias, individuals and how they categorized who was eligible for these early releases, they left out Black and Brown individuals, as well as non-English speakers, because they looked at bail amounts and said, okay, we'll release everybody who has under $5,000 bail, but we know that because of structural racism, Black individuals are given higher bail amounts. They're overcharged. They're often then, because of this construct of race, they're viewed as violent, even though they're non-violent offenders. So again, them being excluded from these releases, and this is coming straight from a judge who did a walkthrough. And we've reduced the jail population approximately by 300 individuals here. And our jail has never been so low, since the early 2000s. But she said that she was just taken aback as she did her walkthrough to see that those who were left behind were Black and Brown individuals. So again, then just pushing the justice system to, address those blatant inequities and force those releases. And also, working with the Department of Health and our governor's office on crisis standards of care, who has access to testing. A lot of Black individuals who historically do not have access to equitable health care are not being able to get tested. for COVID-19. Though we know that there is, potential exposure. So being screened out of the testing process and potentially from intervention processes, the crisis standards of care, which the governor initially implemented, talked about, who would receive like a ventilator, and looking at individuals that had lower muscle mass or lower lung capacity. And we know just historically that is, something that, impacts the Black community, because medicines are not made for, Black individuals. They're made for, they may be tested on Black individuals, but they're made for the dominant culture. So, addressing those inequities and forcing the governor to, look at that and address those crisis standards of care.
Now, it's something you said, and I just have to say, because I want you to validate it if that's the case, or tell me why you're saying this. You're saying, and again, correct me if I'm wrong. When you say this, you talked about drugs or vaccinations or things that are created to heal people. Did I hear you saying that they're not made to heal people of color?
Yes, and if you've ever had an opportunity, there's great information about bad medicine, on how historically Black communities have been harmed through testing, and how they always look towards Africa or socially economically impacted communities. I mean, look at the suicide with the experiments there, with vaccine trials in Africa. I mean, we see it over and over again, and that's just a reality. Even with some of our lung medicines that would treat asthma, in Black individuals, they cause further complications. But do you see pharmaceutical companies correcting that? No. Do you see healthcare providers talking about that? If you use this product, you could develop this because it is not, made for Black people. And no, you don't see that happening.
Okay. We'll have to thank you for sharing that. We'll see, because what I'm hearing you say again is whether it's intentional or not intentional, drugs that don't work on Black people based specifically off of their thing, which is called race, which doesn't exist, or I appreciate you putting that on the table, and we'll check it out. Pastor Lonnie Mitchell, same question. How do you think the coronavirus pandemic is impacting Spokane, impacting the Black community, and how do you think that Black leadership has responded during the coronavirus pandemic in Spokane?
Thank you, Tony, for that question, and I want to thank Carmen for really putting those challenges on the table.
And I will say this, because again, my job here is to ask questions. I'm not just let anything, but there's no questioning the fact that there have been experimentations with Black people, and the reason why Black folks have a fear of vaccines is because of all of the things that have been done in a number of different ways that we've been using that way. But again, I just want to make sure I'm fair in the conversation when we said that. So go ahead, Pastor Mitchell.
And that's good. And of course, systemically, Black and brown folk are challenged even prior to COVID-19. And so that's pretty much leading into what we're experiencing right now. However, I just want to give kudos to our Black leadership here in Spokane. And of course, Sandy Williams is leading the way with the Black Lens, who actually put out truth out in the newspaper that she edited. And so I'm hoping one of these days, Sandy, we could even expand the Black Lens into other areas so that people can see across the state what's happening in Spokane. But yeah, we are. Of course, for the faith community, we're challenged because, we can't see our people's face. and we have to do so many things to make that happen. Right now, we're under the focus where when we can't do what we do, we'll do what we can, and so that's what's happening with the faith community right now. We have some wonderful leaders who really taking this by storm, and just trying to make sure that the folks here in Spokane are taken care of. I give kudos to Pastor Kendricks, pastor of the Morning Star Baptist Church, and also the president of the Ministers Fellowship Union, who's really taken a good lead in helping us out in this. So we're getting through this. It has impacted us. We are getting through this, and we will come out victorious as we continue to do the things that we do.
Okay, and also joining us again from the Black Lens that Pastor Mitchell just mentioned, Sandy Williams. And the question, I will ask it again. How has the coronavirus pandemic impacted Spokane? How has the coronavirus pandemic impacted the Black community of Spokane? And how has Black leadership in Spokane responded to the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, I think in addition to what Carmen mentioned, which is very accurate, and what Pastor Mitchell mentioned, I think one of the areas that I've been focusing on is how our businesses, Black businesses, are being sort of devastated by the governor's stay-at-home order. And I think what I would say primarily is that we, the structure of the Black community in Spokane, we were just getting to a place, I think, where we were starting to build infrastructure in our community, an infrastructure that I think was gonna last and was gonna lift us up as a people. And so coronavirus sort of came along, and I think is really doing some damage to some of the work that we've been able to do in terms of starting to build up our Black businesses, some of our economic vitality. So I think COVID is impacting us both in business and economics. Access to medical care was always an issue, and I think this is just amplifying what was already there. I think housing is something that hasn't been talked about. The racial disparity in access to housing, whether it's housing that is purchased or housing that you rent, and a stay-at-home order sort of implies that you have a home to stay at home in, and there are racial disparities in terms of who has access to that in Spokane, and I think that's being amplified by this virus. But I think in terms of somebody who publishes a newspaper, I think the big thing that I would say is that one of the things that's being hurt is our capacity to communicate with each other. So I distribute the paper across Spokane, and all the places I distribute to are closed. The churches are sort of the backbone of where I distribute the Black Lens newspaper, and the churches are closed, and the Black businesses are closed, and the community centers where I distribute the paper are closed. So our capacity to get information out has been damaged, and we're not, as a rule, social media folk. The young people are, but my generation and older, in terms of the Black community, the access to the information has been damaged by the virus and its impact on our community. And so I think it's just showing our vulnerabilities in a whole lot of areas and amplifying our vulnerabilities. And hopefully what we can do with that is use that information to shore up those things in the future.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. It's me, your host, Tony B. This is our special impact of the coronavirus show on the South Seattle community and surrounding communities. And you know what? Eastern Washington is a surrounding community in the state of Washington, so I'm happy to have our guests on the show. Just, and half an hour goes by so quickly. But is anybody there aware the racial statistics about how this is impacting in Spokane. Again, this was something that was not released. I mentioned earlier in the show that we were presenting people from our community who had COVID-19 before anything was even made public, or they were saying that there were even cases in South Seattle. I talked to the mayor of Tacoma yesterday, and who finally got some statistics out that were race related, and to no surprise, same deal in the Tacoma area, in the Pierce County area, is that those who were died were disproportionately black compared to the again, the numbers there just overall. Do any of you have access, or do you know of that information, or are you all still in the dark in regards to how this is really impacting racially in the community, health-wise?
I think that information was just coming in over the weekend. And as Sandy and Pastor Mitchell, I don't know if you were aware of that. Dr. Lutz, our Chief Health Officer here in Spokane, was just in conversation. Oh, actually, Sandy was, because she was leading the Conversations in Black with Keonta Duncan. And, he did speak about that information, but it has not been distributed. It's just information that just came in over this last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's correct. The Spokane Health Officer was on a live stream that the Black Lens hosted yesterday, and he talked about that the stats were coming out. We've been asking for, I know the NAACP has been asking for sort of disaggregated information about the impact where race is concerned. And so I know that that's coming. It just isn't out yet.
Okay.
And Sandy, I was thinking that, I actually haven't heard anything about it. And I'm just wondering, and I'm sure that if you get the statistics, you would definitely put it in the Black Lens. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And, again, I knew this time was going to pass quickly, so I'm glad that we got to get words from you, and I hate to rush you again. There's a number of things that we didn't talk about: the impact of childcare, those folks who have to go out and continue to work during this time, not because they necessarily want to, but they have to, and how that is impacting the community, and what public transportation is like. Again, if there is a homeless situation, and how that is impacting the community, all these things in this very nuanced, but I'm glad we had some connection here. And unfortunately, I'm almost out of time, but I want to give each of you an opportunity for final words here before we go. And if I have to cut you off, I apologize in advance, as we're preparing for the mayor of Yakima to come up in the next segment. But Carmen Pacheco Jones, thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing valuable information with us. And I want to give you the opportunity here for final words.
Yes, thank you, Tony. I think, just keeping those lines of communication open, whether that's locally through the Black Lens, or, statewide, that is very important for our African-American community to stay connected and reduce incidents of isolation. And also so that those of us can advocate for the community when we see issues of disparity.
Thank you. And Pastor Mitchell, again, thank you for being central in helping organize this and bringing this connection to fruition between Western Washington and Eastern Washington and our communities. Again, as I mentioned before, there are Black communities in a number of different cities, some of them smaller. I think Spokane is the second largest, at least population-wise, state in the city in the state. I don't know population-wise how much of that is a Black community, but again, at the end of the day, we recognize some of the same problems that are going to be impacted, such as health disparities, and again, the result of small businesses. Pastor Mitchell, I want to give you an opportunity here for final words.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for allowing us to be on and to pretty much talk about this issue. One of the things that really helps me out as a person is to know that we have some incredible, great leaders over here in Spokane. Carmen and Sandy. We have some good people, and because of that, the communication lines are open, and we were able to disperse that to the people in our community. And I just really want to thank them for their leadership.
All right, and Sandy, I'm going to give you a shameless plug here. For anybody who wants to find out more about what's going on in Spokane, you know what? If there is an online way, check out the Black Lens. I'll let Sandy say that a little bit to you, a little bit more about that to you. Sandy, thank you for what you are doing over there, and thank you for sharing. And I want to certainly give you the opportunity for final words here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Tony, for what you're doing. blacklensnews.com. That's my shameless plug.
That's my shameless plug. I'm plugging it here. You should be doing that. I'm putting it out there front and center.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the final thing that I would say is that, with all the coverage of COVID-19 that was happening initially, it wasn't until the Black press started talking about racial disparities that the mainstream press started talking about racial disparities. So I think so I appreciate what you're doing, Tony, because I think what's going to need to continue happening is that our community is going to have to keep speaking up, whether that's radio or newspaper or television or whatever. We're going to have to keep beating those drums, because absent that, it's not going to be talked about. And our community is going to have to rally to support our community. One of the exciting things that happened with the live stream yesterday is we were talking to one of our businesses that's really struggling. And when we got off that phone, the community rallied and started purchasing products from them. So we really are going to have to step up as a community and help ourselves, because we get left out. We just consistently get left out in the process. So we're going to have to start taking care of ourselves. And I think COVID-19 is going to demonstrate that in a really big way.
Well, I hope that we can all stay connected and continue to get information from you. Know that we want to hear from you, and we will stay connected with you. I look forward to making that happen. I've got the City of Yakima Mayor Patricia Byers coming up here in a second. So Carmen, Pacheco Jones, Pastor Lonnie Mitchell, and Sandy Williams, thank each of you for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We will be back with our guest, Mayor of Yakima, Patricia Byers, in a couple minutes.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and when I'm not busy tearing the roof off the suckers, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Ito po ang PhilAm Radio, programang Pilipino para sa mga Pilipino saan man kayo naroroon.
PhilAm Radio tuwing Martes, 1:00 ng hapon, dito sa Seattle, Washington.
Pakinggan ninyo ang PhilAm Radio sa internet, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. At kami po ang inyong mga lingkod, Kuya Bert Kawili, Emma Heron at
Manny Panganiban.
PhilAm Radio.
What is the coronavirus? Coronavirus is affecting people's ability to go unanswered questions about the coronavirus.
What's the deal with
I feel like we're not getting the whole story about the coronavirus. There are several patients at the hospital who are at end of life. What is the coronavirus?
Coronavirus disease 2019, known as COVID-19, is a respiratory illness that can spread from person to person. Patients with COVID-19 have had mild to severe respiratory illness with symptoms of fever, cough, and shortness of breath. There is currently no vaccine to protect against COVID-19. There is no specific antiviral treatment for COVID-19. If you're concerned and you have symptoms, don't go to urgent care. Call your provider or call the ER or urgent care.
If you don't have anyone's number, call King County's coronavirus line at 206-477-3977. Or if that line is busy, you can try 1-800-525-0127.
This message is a public service announcement of Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
What's on your heart? Are you exhausted at the lack of progress for people of color in business, politics, and life? This is Cindy Bright, the host of Heartbeat Radio. Each week we explore this heart condition of the country that is affecting you and me. We have real conversations about what's necessary for change. It's time to change this dialogue. Will you join this Heartbeat weekly Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on Rainier Avenue Radio?